This is Oromo Voice Radio English program.
Welcome to Oromia Insight. My name is Ali Galeto. Today I will present to you two segments. One is from last week, Ethiopia finds itself on brink of civil war, and Dr. Awol Allo speaks to Arise News on current protest.
Tried to defend themselves with whatever weapon they have upon the forceful and violent reaction of the government. But still, their struggle is very peaceful.
Well, is this
now, talking about Gumbot Sabat, okay. Yes, I hear about this organization. I know about this organization. It is a peaceful organization that is looking for peaceful solution to the problem. But the history of this brutal regime for over the last 25 years has proven that it just cannot listen to the just demand of the people peacefully and will not look into peaceful resolution of conflicts. Then it will have to be met with the kind of force it uses so that it could listen to the people. But upon really the decision of the government to peacefully engage or negotiate with all the stakeholders and democratic organizations in Ethiopia representing the legitimate causes of their people, I think Gumbo Sabat is ready to put down its arms and enter into negotiations that would lead towards a peaceful transition to democracy and creating a caretaker or transitional government. This is what I understand from their political manifestos and declarations.
Yeah. Getachew Begashaw is a professor of economics at Harper College. He's originally from Ethiopia. And Sina Jimjimo is a Chicago-based writer and campaign director for the Oromo Advocacy Group. And we're talking about what's happened in Ethiopia. Over 100 protesters were killed over the weekend. Now, the United States plays a crucial role here with Ethiopia. What do you think, Sina, the United States should be doing here? Because they've been a big supporter of the Ethiopian government over the years, and now people are rising up. They're getting shot in the streets. What do you do?
I understand that, United States is not just all support. They're actually enabler of the current regime or government. What the U.S. need to understand is that this road is not sustainable, because we understand that right now the Ethiopia being in a hot region with Al-Shabaab being right there and with the rise of extremists, we understand that very concerning. We know about that. However, unless the demand of the people are met, and true democracy is the only answer that will sustain that country at peace and keep that country together and stable. And the United States need to be with the side of people, because yes, I mean, over the past 8-9 months, over 600 people killed, over 50,000 people arrested, and many have injured. My own birth city, I'll give you an example. The protests start in November 12th. By December 12th, 13 people have died in my own birth city, in a small city that nobody knows.
And 13 people from your home city.
Yes. So this is what we see. This is the body. This is our relative. This is our family that again in a small city of 5,000 people. 13 people died. 219 arrested. 3 girls were raped. This is the incident that we hear from every city, and this is the reality of the Oromo people. Too many blood have shed. The United States cannot sustain. Ethiopia regime will not be a dependent, reliable governance right now unless solution is brought up and to talk to oppositions.
And the supporters of the Ethiopian government hold all the seats in parliament.
Exactly. They won the election last year by 100%.
And the United States has said, well, it is a democratic election. They didn't exactly come out and really criticize what was going on.
Exactly. In fact, President Obama went to Ethiopia to as emerging democracy, as a growth, and where you see that you have 19 million people, and this hunger, the famine is not just a famine by itself, a natural disaster. It's actually more about the land, the resource, and the fertile land is given in the name of investment to foreign people and to foreign companies, and where people are displaced, and that's what's leading to hunger and famine every year. And the U.S. U.S. is giving aid instead of really looking down to what is the cause of those famine every year. Why is the people are being displaced, and why are people angry? And those core issues, the Oromo issue is an identity issue, and not just the Oromo right now, it's the whole Amara. As Getachew says, 75% of the population are rising up against. Unless those grievances are addressed, this government will not be sustainable. It will not be an ally to the U.S. government.
Getachew, do you want to weigh in on the U.S. role here?
Oh, yes. It is really quite refreshing as of yesterday to hear many international agencies, especially the United Nations High Commission for Human Rights, is calling for a thorough investigation into these mass killings.
And they want to send in observers, and the government doesn't want them to.
Definitely it would not. And I believe the British government and also I think the German government have expressed similar kind of views and concerns as to what this government is perpetrating against the Ethiopian people, in particular the Oromos and the Amaras. And I hope the United States is listening to this. It's true, as you mentioned, and also I remember appearing on your show last time that President Obama went to Ethiopia and endorsed this government as a democratically elected, which was wrong and really shameful for a leader of such a great country that has been a friend of Ethiopia for a long time. And please, just let it be clear that the Ethiopian people don't have anything against the American people and American government, hoping that U.S. will be the friend, it had been and will be a good friend of Ethiopians in time of needs, but extremely disappointed and during that visit. And I hope it will be a good time now to correct those kinds of unexpected diplomatic mishaps, let me say it, and to side with the Ethiopian people.
We're going to have to wrap things up, but Sina, I want you to mention you're working with Congress to get resolutions.
Right, Senate, yes, and we're actually right now, the Senate Resolution 432 was introduced in April, and subcommittee passed unanimously from U.S. Foreign Committee.
And what does it say?
So basically, the resolution talks about good governance in Ethiopia, asking for release of political prisoners, asking for respect for human rights, and asking for basically for dialogue, and ask for the U.S. aid to kind of implement those, and ask for independent investigation, because right now in Ethiopia there's not a single human rights organization, not Amnesty, not Human Rights Watch are based in there. They're not in there. Human Rights Watch released a statement 400 people died, but the Ethiopian government says about 100 people died. That's just really huge difference right there. So I mean, we're working with the Congress, and the Congress have spoken, and we are really hoping to push further on that one for that resolution to pass, and to send to strong message from the U.S. Congress that they are concerned, and we are really concerned, and really in desperate need of the U.S. Attention, and this issue should be investigated thoroughly by independent body, because they cannot be reliable.
Sina Jimjimo is a Chicago-based writer and campaign director for the Oromo Advocacy Group, and Getachew Begashaw is a professor of economics at Harper College, originally from Ethiopia. Thanks a lot for joining us, and we'll keep in touch about what's happening in Ethiopia. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Well, joining me to look at this issue is Dr. Awol Allo, Fellow in Human Rights at the London School of Economics. And, of course, you are a member of the Oromo community.
That's correct.
Now, just tell us how combustible the situation in Ethiopia is right now. Are these low-level protests, or are they something big enough to threaten the government?
I think the country right now is exploding. I mean, who would have expected that the government who just a year ago claimed to have 100% of the seats and received that ringing endorsement from President Obama would be gripped by this type of nationwide protest? It's basically shaking the foundation of the state.
Right, so let me get this straight. Two sets of protests in Oromia sort of region and Amhara region, essentially the two most populous ethnic groups in Ethiopia. But they're not fighting each other, but appear to be united in solidarity against the government. What's the root of those protests?
Absolutely. So the Oromos have been protesting for almost 9 months now, since mid-November 2015. And the protest initially started as a result of the government announcing a master plan for the city of Addis Ababa, which would expand the territorial limits of the capital into neighboring Oromia region. There are already grievances around Rand Club and huge persecution.
Yeah, but the government scrapped that land plan, I think, in January.
Yes, so what happened...
the protests have flared again.
Exactly. What happened was that in the course of those protests, the government killed close to 400 people, according to Human Rights Watch, and that's a very conservative figure. Activists put that figure at significantly higher number. So the government said, we suspended the master plan for a time being, but the people know that even if the master plan is theoretically scrapped, the practice of evicting people, removing people forcibly from their land would continue.
So that is why the Oromo people are so unhappy.
They are unhappy. It's partly because the government used unmitigated, overwhelming violence to quell the protest. That is a government that doesn't actually represent the Oromo people. So what people started to say was, how long do we put up with a government that is not only undemocratic, but kills us every time we make these very basic demands to simply have a say in these development policies? So it's precisely that moment that turned that specific land-related question into a broad system.
Right. So basically these protests unearth uncomfortable truths about Ethiopia's human rights record. That's the allegation that people like you are making.
Absolutely. Not just the human rights record. I think Ethiopia's human rights record has been abysmal for the last 20 years. Everyone knows this. The UN knows this. Almost every major human rights organization have been putting reports after reports about the horrible human rights situation there, including the US government, by the way, which continued to date to defend the Ethiopian government and to back it simply on account of security relationship. So the human rights issue is not at stake. What is at stake, actually, is this narrative that Ethiopia is a rising giant economically, that it has been growing. Yes, there is no question that the country has been growing over the course of the last 10 years, but this is not a growth that is equally shared by people. And what people are basically saying is that they are simply watching while other people are eating.
So in other words, the impression that we had of Ethiopia as a country that's doing well economically, a sort of poster boy for African development, that's an erroneous impression.
It is extremely exaggerated. It's blown out of proportion precisely because the legitimacy of the government depends on inflating those figures. It's not a government that rules on the basis of the legitimacy, the mandates that it gets from people, but on the basis of claims that we are lifting people out of poverty. This is the most important.
So why is the government, let me use the word, oppressing the Oromo and the Amhara people? I mean, how ethnically driven is this oppression? Because I understand you're the two biggest ethnic groups, and the government, or majority of the people in government, come from a smaller ethnic group. Is that right?
Absolutely. So the Oromos have historic grievances against subsequent Ethiopian governments. But over the course of the last 20 years, we had a system that came into power on the back of responding to these historic grievances. What happened over the last 20 years is that the party that purports to represent the Tigrayan people from the northern part of Ethiopia, which constitutes 6% of the Ethiopian people, took absolute control of every major aspect of public life, from the economy to politics, security, and the military. And they have been consolidating their power in all spheres of life. So the point of repressing the Oromos and the Amharas is precisely because these are the two largest groups. Their very presence calls the legitimacy of the regime into question, because this is a system that is existentially based on identity. So one of the most significant developments over these 4 or 5 months is this growing convergence between the Oromos and the Amharas, who constitute between 70 to 75% of the Ethiopian people, and saying we had historic differences, we have to set aside those differences. It's precisely our differences that has allowed the system to dominate and oppress us.
So how long do you see these protests going on? Is there any sense at all that there may be a sitting down around a negotiating table at some point?
It's not clear to what extent the government is willing to bring in all the necessary or the critical stakeholders. One of the ways through which the Ethiopian government has been consolidating its power is by naming or by describing some of the key political groups that are independent political parties as terrorist groups. And obviously this has some traction internationally, and that's the easiest way to eliminate people from the democratic public sphere. So independent political actors who actually represent the voices of these people who are protesting are already chased out of the system. They are outside. And the extent to which the government would sit down and negotiate these people would actually determine how far this protest would go. But activists on the ground, people on the ground, seems to be determined to continue with the protest.
Okay, we'll have to leave it there. Dr. Awol Allo, Fellow in Human Rights at the London School of Economics, and of course an Ethiopian from the Oromo region. Thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thanks for having me.